I've been drinking champagne all night, never worry about a damn thing. When y'all might, homie, I'm on my level. Yeah, I'm on my level. Yeah, I'm on my level. Yeah, I'm on my level. So I'ma take one shot.
Hey, thank you for dropping by today. I decided to take a walk in the backyard here, and we're live on location in Monterrey, Nuevo Leon, Mexico. And behind me, if you notice, we have a configuration that you will see in most major metropolitan cities, and that is statues of Greek and Roman gods. But what does it mean? Why will we see this scattered all throughout civilization over time? Even in countries such as Mexico, which have no basis in Greek religion that we know of. Well, if we turn to our scholars and listen to what experts have to say about what the Greek gods were, we'll get a story full of mythology that may on some levels make sense, and on some levels just be speculation. Now, on the other hand, we had religious authorities also explain to us the meaning of some of these statues. But were they accurate? Now, let us consider the possibility that perhaps modern thinkers do not understand what the ancient philosophers were talking about. And when we try to interpret their symbols, we can perhaps understand that maybe we do not know what they were talking about. Let us keep in mind that ancient man didn't have much to work with in terms of material, in terms of what to interpret. Sure, he had the stars, he had the planets, and he did pretty well with those. But if we look at the configuration behind us, what will we see? What will we have? What could it mean? Well, here we have a governing body standing in the middle of a body of water. Something that's perhaps overflowing with water. And you have Neptune standing in the middle, in a sense, controlling the waves. But what waves is Neptune controlling? Well, if we look a little closer at the statue, we'll notice flanked to either sides of Neptune, you will have two angels. I meant angels holding vessels. And vessels are something that receive. But what waves are they receiving? What is Neptune controlling? And what is that dance going on behind it? Well, let us consider the possibility that ancient man did not get this idea from above. No. Or the possibility he didn't even get this idea from around him. No. Let us consider the possibility that he got this configuration from within him.
So it's not only that we can find references to Greek Roman gods made in statues in powerful cities worldwide, we also have them in artwork, in paintings. Take, for example, Venus. Venus was painted by Botticelli. He was a painted philosopher. In his paintings, you would imagine, would reflect his thinking, what was inspiring him. Now, if you look at Venus, You see, Botticelli is in a sense saying the same thing about this particular God, which if you look, you'll notice that she too is, in a sense, erected among a body of water. What's interesting about Botticelli's painting, if you study it, you can zoom into the him with the garment part. I wonder why he puts so much emphasis on this point. We could go into other Greek thinkers and philosophers before the time of, say, Sandra Botticelli. Perhaps Plato. He even has an allegorical tale of this city, or place, called Atlantis, which sunk is not just a small island erected among a ring of many small canals. I think he said 7. It's interesting because we come across that a lot in other mythological tales where you have a person who perhaps had an experience, an enlightening experience, and he is somehow trying to communicate this knowledge to his student, and he can see this knowledge reflected in all his work. Now, that may be the best way we can begin to make some order out of this chaos we're living on it, which could be perhaps what they did. When these natural philosophers were talking about things such as the ocean, Oceanus. Let's go back to Plato for a second. In his time, Atlantis, everything was perfect until this small island sank in its flood. Now, when we begin to look more into these ancient philosophers and some of the symbols they use, we begin to notice the same symbols being used in a very similar way. The example, as we just saw here, water was a common element among all of these thinkers, from the Greek poet Homer, who pretty much gave the Greeks their understanding of the gods. What do you mean by that? Something can explain. We see it in Plato. He's talking about the submersion of this island into water. You even see it in other mystical tales where you have something dumped and submerged in the water. Now, obviously, this process was important for some reason to the ancient thinkers because we see it in their rituals. For example, when you go to ancient Greece, you have these initiates of the mystery school, hierophants, I should call them, in a particular phase called the rebirth. The initiate would basically sit or lay, sleep in a tomb of water. This is a step before the rebirth. And then again, we can kind of see perhaps where they got this idea of birth, rebirth, submerging in water, in darkness. Because we all go into it. It's part of the birthing process. So whether or not we would know what these symbols ever mean, we can't say. But we can begin to question if they mean what we were told they meant. The moment we let other people do the thinking for us, and they feed us their conclusions, it's quite possible, maybe perhaps with their own ignorance, not of ill will, we become misled. Perhaps we are the blind and being led by the door. Maybe that's our mistake. Let's think of it. So again, whether or not we'll come to an understanding of what ancient man was talking about, it goes a little bit of light. It illuminates Venus enough for you to see her better. I guess what I did, I started it a little bit. Small drop of water in here. You can see her. The lights are on. But yeah, it's perhaps we don't know fully what these guys were meaning with their art. But maybe we should think about it independently until that light comes on. We can see things just a little clearer. So whether or not we'll know for sure what the ancient philosopher was trying to teach when we look at his signs, his symbols, word, his logos, it's quite possible we probably will never have a full understanding. We can probably get a clearer picture, or at least a general idea of what they're trying to talk about, if we ourselves clear our minds of any preconceived notions that maybe we have ourselves towards what they were saying, or preconceived notions put into our heads by people who didn't know themselves what these men were talking about. So go through some classic art, pick up some ancient literature, perhaps Greek, Homer's poems, and try to understand it from a different perspective. Maybe you'll see yourself arriving at completely different conclusions than what you once previously believed or were made to believe. You never know. So it appears, in my opinion, that these men were in fact talking about an inner journey.
See, I've been drinking champagne all night.